Chapter 410. Hearing this, the two Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom looked at each other, their eyes filled with shock. Since when did the kingdom of Jesson have such a genius? They had never even heard of such a person before. Xianxia did not waste any more words. Grabbing at the air before him, two burning fire elemental swords instantly condensed. They then shot toward the two Heaven Saint Masters as streaks of red light. The last two Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom did not say much either. Now that they knew that Xianxia was from the kingdom of Jesson, they understood that this battle was unavoidable. Either one of them would die, so the two Heaven Saint Masters did not hold back and used their saint weapons to block the incoming fire elemental swords. With a loud bang, the fire elemental swords that Xianxia had condensed were shattered, turning into flames that filled the air. The two Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom did not dodge. Instead, they protected themselves with a layer of saint force and directly charged into the sea of flames towards Xianxia. Xianxia remained expressionless as he hovered in the air. Although the flames had swallowed the two Heaven Saint Masters, his soul was extremely powerful. The movements of the two Heaven Saint Masters were clearly imprinted into Xianxia's mind like a picture. A pure purple and green light appeared in Xianxia's hand, quickly condensing into a sword. Xianxia planned to end this battle quickly, and the only way to end this battle quickly was to use the origin energy of the sword spirits. Just as the sword spirits finished condensing their origin energy, the two Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom charged out of the sea of flames and arrived in front of Xianxia like lightning. Their two saint weapons carried a powerful pressure of the world as they slashed towards Xianxia. For the first time, the two Heaven Saint Masters had used an Earth-tier battle skill without prior agreement. A bright light flashed in Xianxia's eyes. Although he had lost his saint force, using the chaotic force to refine his body had already made his body extremely strong. Just by relying on the strength of his body, he could unleash an extremely fast speed. With a flash of azure light, Xianxia stabbed out twice with the origin energy of the sword spirits in his right hand, colliding with the saint weapons of the two Heaven Saint Masters. The Earth-rank battle skill's power spread out in all directions from the point of contact, causing Xianxia and the two Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom to be pushed back. As they retreated, the two Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom both spat out a mouthful of blood. Their faces instantly paled as they stared at the saint weapons in their hands in shock. Their faces were filled with disbelief. On the saint weapons in their hands, there was already a two-finger-sized gap. The damage to the saint weapons had also affected them, causing them to be heavily injured. The two Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. Shortly after, one of them immediately yelled, "Immediately activate the highest security alert." In the distance, in a huge palace, there was a group of people standing in front of the palace, watching the battle in the sky. This group of people fanned out and protected an old man in a purple gold dragon robe. Every one of them had a serious expression. The old man in the purple gold dragon robe was the king of the Pingyang Kingdom, and the group of people beside him were his personal guards. However, when they heard the words of the Heaven Saint Master from the Pingyang Kingdom, their faces suddenly changed. "Highest security alert. Not good, Your Majesty. Quickly go to the underground maze. Immediately protect Your Majesty to the underground maze. Quick, quick, don't delay." The guards beside the king shouted in a low voice. Their tone was very urgent. Then, the group of people surrounded the king and quickly retreated into the depths of the palace, disappearing in the blink of an eye. In the sky, Xianxia used the origin energy of the Azure Sword Qi. The powerful attack made the two Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom unable to fight back. The two sides only exchanged a few blows before Xianxia killed the last two Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom. With the death of the two Heaven Saint Masters, there was no one in the palace who could stop Xianxia's footsteps. Xianxia slowly descended from the sky and spread out his soul, covering a radius of 15 kilometers. Then, step by step, he walked towards the huge palace in the center of the Pingyang Kingdom. Very quickly, thousands of elite soldiers gathered around Xianxia, surrounding Xianxia so tightly that not even a drop of water could pass through. However, This group of soldiers did not dare to take a step forward when they were still 100 meters away from Xianxia. Their faces were filled with nervousness and fear as they looked at Xianxia, continuously retreating. No one dared to rush to their deaths. Xianxia did not kill them all. Under the encirclement of thousands of soldiers, he calmly entered the largest palace in the center of the Pingyang kingdom. The soldiers all stopped outside the palace, nervously looking at Xianxia. No one dared to enter without permission. The scene of Xianxia killing the two state masters of the Pingyang kingdom was clearly seen by all the soldiers. Such a shocking battle strength had already made this group of soldiers feel fear. If not for their daily training, they would have already fled due to the fear in their hearts. How would they dare to surround Xianxia? Although this was the first time Xianxia came to the palace of the Pingyang kingdom, he was very clear about the layout of the palace. He directly walked to the dragon throne at the top of the main hall and pressed an inconspicuous button under the throne. Following a series of cha-cha-ta sounds, the dragon throne began to slowly move. Finally, a 2-meter square black hole appeared, and a flight of stairs extended downwards. "Humph, no matter where you hide, don't even think about escaping from me," Xianxia sneered as he whispered in a low voice. Then he directly walked down the hole. The hole was dark and damp, very deep. On both sides of the wall, there was a luminous pearl hanging there every 30 meters, providing a faint ray of light to the pitch-black tunnel. Xianxia followed the tunnel and dived for 1,000 meters before he finally reached the bottom. The ground here was not made of mud, but was completely made of steel. Xianxia's footsteps did not stop, and directly walked towards a passage in front of him. This was an underground labyrinth. The entire labyrinth was made of steel and buried deep underground. It was very sturdy. Even if the soil above collapsed, the people inside the labyrinth would not be harmed in the slightest. With the help of Xianxia's divine sense, Xianxia covered the entire labyrinth. This incomparably complex labyrinth had no secrets in his eyes. However, what made Xianxia surprised was that the entire labyrinth was actually alive. The iron walls inside could actually be controlled and moved at will. Now, the route of the entire labyrinth had undergone a huge change, forming a dead end. If one still followed the original route, they would never be able to get out. They would only keep going in circles inside the labyrinth, and the path leading to the deepest part of the labyrinth was completely blocked by an iron wall. Seeing this, Xianxia could not help but secretly click his tongue. He really struggled to imagine just how long it would take to create such a complex labyrinth of steel. Xianxia walked towards the depths of the labyrinth with great familiarity. Along the way, he used the azulate sword chi to cut a large hole in the wall that blocked his way. If it were a Heaven Saint Master, they would probably be trapped here for a very long time. However, it was completely useless in front of Xianxia. Suddenly, a faint gray mist appeared in the labyrinth and rapidly spread. Very soon, it filled every corner of the labyrinth. This was an extremely terrifying poison. Regular antidotes were completely useless against it. Although it could not directly kill an expert like a Heaven Saint Master, it would still greatly affect them as soon as they came into contact with it. Looking at the poisonous mist floating in the labyrinth, Xianxia's eyes revealed a trace of disdain. He had a body that was impervious to poison. In the world, there were only a few poisons that could pose a threat to him. Xianxia was not affected at all as he walked towards the depths of the labyrinth. Along the way, he would easily use the azulate sword chi to cut a large hole in the wall that blocked his way. At this moment, in the depths of the labyrinth, the king of the Pingyang kingdom and 30 or so loyal guards were in a completely sealed space. Each of them had a serious expression on their faces. The place they were in was the safest place in the labyrinth. Surrounding them were steel walls that were a terrifying 10 meters thick. Even a Heaven Saint Master would find it difficult to break through them. Staying here could be said to be very safe. Moreover, there was a large amount of food stored inside, enough for 100 people to survive for several years. Who is that person? How could his strength be so terrifying? Even the two imperial advisors could not stop him. The king of the Pingyang kingdom muttered with a pale face. "Your Majesty, I believe that person is most likely someone from the kingdom of Xianxia. Since we are currently at war with the kingdom of Xianxia, It is reasonable for them to send experts to seek revenge. One of the guards said. The king of the Pingyang kingdom nodded slightly and said, "You are right. However, I do not know if that person will find this place." The king's face was filled with worry. "Your Majesty, do not worry. This labyrinth is extremely sturdy. Moreover, the path has been changed. In addition, the entrance is very well hidden. Unless there is a spy in our kingdom, he will not be able to find this place." One of the guards said. These people were the king's personal guards. They were loyal to the king and were highly regarded by the king. "Your Majesty, you do not need to worry. Soon, the experts stationed at the border fortress will arrive. When that time comes, the expert from the kingdom of Xianxia will only be able to escape." One of the guards said with a serious face. Until now, they still did not know that the Heaven Saint Masters of the Pingyang Kingdom had all been killed in battle. This was because the news of what happened at the border fortress had not yet reached here. Xianxia broke through one wall after another. After a few kilometers, he finally arrived at the deepest part of the labyrinth. He arrived in front of a shiny and thick steel wall. Chapter 411. Xianxia didn't hold back at all. With a flick of his finger, a ray of azure and violet sword chi shot out from his fingertips and killed every single one of the great Saint Master Guards. Under this wave of attacks, only 3 Earth Saint Master Guards had managed to survive. "Your Majesty, hurry up and run, we'll stall him." The 3 Earth Saint Master Guards didn't cower in the slightest and immediately leapt at Xianxia to use their bodies to block him so that the king could escape. The king of the Pingyang Kingdom looked at his dead guards with a pained expression. He didn't choose to run away because he knew that he wouldn't be able to escape and that it would only be a waste of energy. "Stop!" The king of the Pingyang Kingdom suddenly spoke up to stop the 3 guards. His voice was weak and lacking in energy. Looking at Xianxia, he spoke, "This king has been forced into a corner by you. There is no hope for me to escape. Could you please tell me who you are? Even if I die, I will die in peace." Xianxia looked emotionlessly at the king of the Pingyang Kingdom. "Who I am is not important. All you need to know is that I am a citizen of the Xianxia Kingdom." "Just as I thought, you really are from the Xianxia Kingdom." The king of the Pingyang Kingdom let out a long sigh as he looked at Xianxia. It would appear that this king's decision to ally with the other 3 kingdoms to attack the Xianxia Kingdom was a mistake. "I had thought this would be a sure win, but who would have thought that the Xianxia Kingdom would have such a strong expert hidden within? To think that one person would be able to break into the imperial palace of my Pingyang Kingdom and force this king to this point, AI." The king of the Pingyang Kingdom grew even more depressed. In that moment, it seemed as if he had aged a lot and his entire person had become listless. "This king has already become your prisoner. This king is willing to cooperate with you in any decision you make. If you wish to kill me, I will do as you please. However, this king begs you to forgive my guards, they are all innocent." The king pleaded with Xianxia. "Your Majesty, this servant's mission is to protect your Majesty. The 3 of us do not fear death." The 3 guards were moved by His Majesty's words. They all knelt down on one knee and spoke passionately. They had already disregarded their own lives. The king shook his head. "This war is all on this king's shoulders. The consequences should be borne by this king, it has nothing to do with you. Besides, you have your own families and children to take care of." At the mention of family and children, the 3 guards had a complicated look on their faces as tears began to well up in their eyes. Xianxia's eyes grew even more complicated as well. The king's words of family and children caused Xianxia to think about them. Xianxia couldn't help but think about his family back in the Changyang clan. The king looked at Xianxia with a pleading look. "This is all my fault. This king will immediately order my Pingyang Kingdom to retreat. I only hope that you will forgive my 3 guards." Xianxia looked at the 3 guards and saw that they were all pale in the face. When they had tried to block Xianxia's azure and violet sword chi, they had suffered some injuries. Xianxia hesitated for a moment before finally agreeing to the king's proposal. "I can forgive them, but if the 3 of them dare to do anything to harm the Xianxia Kingdom in the future, then they will have to blame me for being ruthless." The king let out a sigh of relief. These 30 guards had already followed him for 20 years and had always protected him in silence. Although they were master and servant, their relationship was very deep. The king didn't want to see these guards who had once protected him die in front of his eyes. He knew just how strong Xianxia was, and if even a Heaven Saint Master couldn't stop him, then how could these 3 Earth Saint Master guards stop him? They would only be sending themselves to their deaths. Xianxia didn't kill the king of the Pingyang kingdom. Instead, he grabbed the king's shoulder and left the area, leaving behind the 3 guards who were lucky enough to survive. Your Majesty! The 3 guards had hot tears in their eyes as they watched the king leave. Although they wanted to rush forward and save the king, they didn't have the ability to do so. Xianxia grabbed the king of the Pingyang kingdom and quickly left the underground labyrinth. Reappearing in front of the grand hall, the hall was already filled with armored men. Every single one of them was a commander with a high status, and there were even a few elders that were high-ranking generals. Seeing Xianxia emerge from the hole, all the generals in the hall immediately grew nervous. Many of them had already pulled out their saint weapons, planning to stop Xianxia even if they had to risk their lives. They had already sent word that the experts stationed at the border of the stronghold would return soon. However, when an old man in a purplish gold dragon robe walked out of the hole, everyone's expressions changed drastically. With their intelligence, they knew without even thinking that the king had been captured by the old man. Seeing the entire hall filled with officials and elite soldiers, the captured king let out a long sigh. Quickly giving the order for all of the soldiers to retreat, the king immediately issued an imperial decree to recall all of the soldiers that were gathered at the northern border of the Jessan kingdom. After the imperial decree was given, the king turned to look at Xianxia. What do you want me to do now? Xianxia's display of strength had already caused the king to admit defeat. The king knew that if he didn't cooperate, then even more people would be implicated. Perhaps even the imperial palace would be bathed in blood, because there were far too many examples of this happening on the Tianyuan continent. Take me to the imperial treasury. Xianxia spoke. Hearing this, everyone's faces blanched. Immediately, a scholarly-looking elder spoke up. No, the imperial treasury is the source of our kingdom's wealth. If the imperial treasury is robbed, then we. PCD. Before the elder could finish speaking, Xianxia had already shot out a beam of azure and violet sword chi that pierced through his head, killing him on the spot. Prime Minister. Many of the officials and generals cried out sorrowfully as they looked at Xianxia with eyes filled with anger. Grandfather. Several of the younger generals cried out in grief as they drew out their saint weapons. Their eyes flashed with hatred as they roared out, "We'll fight you to the death." With that, the generals charged at Xianxia. You can't, everyone stand down. The king cried out, but it was too late. Xianxia didn't hold back at all. Pointing out with his finger, several beams of azure and violet sword chi shot out and pierced through the throats of the generals, staining the entire hall with blood. Stand down, everyone stand down. No one is to act blindly without thinking. The king cried out anxiously. The people in the hall were all high-ranking members of the Pingyang kingdom and were the pillars of the kingdom. If they were to be lost, then the Pingyang kingdom would only exist in name. Afraid that Xianxia would kill everyone in the hall in a fit of rage, he hurriedly replied, "This king will take you to the treasury. No one is to stop us. Anyone who disobeys will be executed." Afterward, the king of the Pingyang kingdom led Xianxia to the treasury. Behind the two of them, a large group of soldiers followed closely behind them with nervous expressions on their faces. Very quickly, Xianxia was led by the king to the treasury. The king commanded the guards to open the gates and walk in with Xianxia. The treasury of the Pingyang kingdom was located within the royal palace. It was an extremely large underground space with several different areas where all sorts of resources were stored. Xianxia brought the king to the area where the monster cores were stored. This was an extremely large room with several large wooden boxes that were at least a meter tall. Each box was emitting a large amount of energy, and at the very center, several space belts were hung on a metal rack. Xianxia swept out his presence to look at the monster cores within the boxes. He could see that all of the monster cores in the boxes were Class 1 and Class 2 monster cores, and there were so many of them that it was impossible to count. Xianxia walked up to the innermost shelf that had several dozen space belts hanging on it. Noticing that each space belt had a note attached to it that stated the item's name and quantity. There are a total of 500 Class 3 monster cores. There are a total of 621 Class 3 monster cores. There are a total of 1000 Class 3 monster cores. There are a total of 700 Class 4 monster cores. There are a total of 530 Class 4 monster cores. Within the dozens of space belts, there were Class 3, Class 4 and Class 5 monster cores. Each space belt had at least 500 monster cores, with the most Class 3 monster cores being around 60 to 70,000. The Class 4 monster cores were relatively few at around 10,000, and the Class 5 monster cores were the least at a mere 400. Seeing the number of monster cores on the space belts, Xianxia couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. The amount of monster cores here had reached a frightening level, causing Xianxia to feel tongue-tied. However, when he thought about how the Pingyang Kingdom had a population of 700 million, he felt at ease. This was the treasury of the Pingyang Kingdom, and with the population of the Pingyang Kingdom, there wouldn't be a single ripple in the treasury. Perhaps this was the result of the Pingyang Kingdom's 10 or even 100 years of accumulation. Xianxia stored all of the space belts into his space ring. Even the wooden boxes with the Class 1 and Class 2 monster cores were not spared. It was a good thing that he had several space rings on him, so there was enough space to store all of these items. Seeing the monster cores being taken away by Xianxia, the king couldn't help but feel like crying. After this calamity, even if the Pingyang Kingdom wasn't destroyed, it would be a long time before the kingdom's strength would be at an all-time low. Afterward, Xianxia went to the treasury and took away all of the space belts. With a large amount of purple coins, he estimated that there were at least 100 million purple coins. This was practically the entire wealth of the Pingyang Kingdom. Chapter 412. Within the northern fort of the Xianxia Kingdom, the situation had stabilized for the time being. All of the injured soldiers had begun to tend to their wounds, while a few Radiant Saint Masters were constantly using their Radiant Saint force to heal the injured generals. On the walls, groups of bandaged soldiers patrolled the area. Currently, the heads of the 9 enemy experts were hanging on the walls, greatly boosting the morale of the soldiers. On both sides of the walls, a large number of craftsmen were busy repairing the walls. Countless 1-meter square stones were pulled up from the back to fix the broken parts of the walls. Outside the fortress, several thousand soldiers of the Kingdom of Xianxia were digging a few large pits in the distance to bury the bodies of the fallen soldiers. Currently, the army of the Kingdom of Pingyang had retreated to a distance of 30 kilometers and was not moving at all. Clearly, the death of the Heaven Saint Masters had a huge impact on their morale. In the fortress, there were over 30 armored officers gathered together. Every one of them had a solemn expression on their faces. "Everyone, I have just received a message from the eastern, southern, and western fortresses. The enemy has already broken through 3 of our border fortresses and is marching towards the royal capital. Our soldiers have suffered heavy casualties. Another Heaven Saint Master has died at the hands of the enemy. The other Heaven Saint Masters have also been heavily injured. The situation is extremely dangerous," an old man said solemnly as he looked at the crowd. Hearing this, the faces of everyone present turned incomparably solemn. The strongholds in the east, west, and east had already been breached. If they didn't stop it, once the army breached the imperial city, the Xianxia Kingdom would be completely finished. It seems like even if the imperial advisor of the Qin Empire hurries over to help, it will be useless. The difference in the number of experts on both sides is just too great. With just the 5 of them, it will be difficult to turn the situation around, a general sighed. "I hope the Qin Empire's state preceptor can use the might of the Qin Empire to deter the enemy's army. I believe they won't dare to offend the Qin Empire. Otherwise, the Qin Empire would only need 1 million elite soldiers to flatten the 4 kingdoms. I don't think it's that simple. Everyone knows that the Qin Empire is very far away from here, and the Kingdom of Xianxia has never crossed paths with the Qin Empire before. I don't think the enemy will believe the identities of the 5 grand advisors of the Qin Empire. They will only think that they are reinforcements that the kingdom of Jesson has found. That makes a lot of sense. I think that's most likely the case. Since the Qin Empire's national prestige can't deter them, what should we do now? Once the imperial city is breached, what's the point of us staying here? In the end, we can only surrender obediently. The generals all began to discuss intensely. Everyone spoke one after another about the possible situations that they might face. The situation was very critical. For now, the northern fortress can only send a group of troops to assist the eastern, southern, western, and northern fortresses. Everyone, what do you think? An old general voiced his opinion. Hearing this, everyone frowned. After a short moment of silence, one of the generals said, "But our northern fortress only has a total of less than 3 million soldiers. Most of them are exhausted and injured. Furthermore, they are formed by countless mercenaries and lack discipline. I don't think that even if we send the vanguard of this army over, we will be able to save the situation. This is our only choice." I agree with this suggestion. That's right. We can only do this. The situation at the northern fort has stabilized. 8 Heaven Saint Masters from the kingdom of Pingyang have already died. There are only 2 left in the imperial palace. I don't think they will act rashly. We can send a part of our army to assist the other 3 fortresses. Although we won't be able to stop the enemy, we can at least delay them for a while. After an intense discussion, the generals finally came to a decision. A few of the stronger generals who were not heavily injured would lead a group of 2 million soldiers to the other 3 fortresses. A large portion of the Radiant Saint Masters guarding the northern fort was also sent away. Less than a third of them were left in the northern fort. Soon after, the 2 Heaven Saint Masters in the northern fort received the news as well. Chang Wuji and Kafir ignored their wounds that had not healed completely and immediately hurried to the eastern fort. Everyone from the Changyang clan followed them. With the departure of the 2 million-strong army, the northern fortress had become somewhat empty. There were only a few 100,000 soldiers left, and they were all injured or disabled. The departure of the 2 million soldiers from the northern fort naturally could not be hidden from the people of the Pingyang kingdom. In a large tent in the Pingyang kingdom, more than a dozen generals of different ages were gathered together. Their faces were filled with grief and indignation because many of the dead Heaven Saint Masters were seniors in their clans. "General Hong, what are you hesitating for? Right now, the kingdom of Jesson is only left with a few injured soldiers. You should just give the order to attack. This time, we must break through the northern fort and hang the heads of all the Heaven Saint Masters in the kingdom of Jesson on the walls to avenge my grandfather. No, we have already suffered heavy losses. We have indirectly caused the death of 8 Heaven Saint Masters. Our strength is not even half of what it used to be. What we need to think about now is not how to take down the kingdom of Jesson, but how to protect ourselves," the armored general said with a heavy voice. His face was extremely solemn. With the death of 8 Heaven Saint Masters in the kingdom of Pingyang, the peak experts in the kingdom of Pingyang were basically empty. A kingdom like this no longer had any deterrence. As soon as the old general finished speaking, a middle-aged man chimed in, "Old General Hong is right. Right now, our kingdom only has 2 Heaven Saint Masters left. Once the Hidden Dragon Kingdom, the Blue Wind Kingdom, and the All's Kingdom invade the Jesson Kingdom, who can guarantee that they won't take advantage of the fact that our Pingyang Kingdom's strength is greatly weakened to attack us? Are we not going to avenge my grandfather?" The general who lost his grandfather was extremely angry and said with indignation, "Don't worry, the kingdom of Jesson is destined to be destroyed this time. All the Heaven Saint Masters will be killed as well. Don't tell me you want to kill a Heaven Saint Master with the strength of an Earth Saint Master?" a general said with a cold expression. Hearing this, the general who lost his grandfather secretly sighed. He also understood that he would not be able to kill his enemy with his own hands. In the end, the army of the kingdom of Pingyang did not attack the northern stronghold of the kingdom of Jesson due to various reasons. They only stayed 30 kilometers away from the kingdom of Jesson's border and did not move. However, not long after, the news of the destruction of the border stronghold of the kingdom of Pingyang reached the front lines. The main point of the news was that an unknown Heaven Saint Master had broken into the territory of the kingdom of Pingyang and was heading straight for the royal capital. This news shocked the general who was in the middle of the battle. He immediately ordered the army to retreat. In the underground labyrinth, the king of the kingdom of Pingyang and his bodyguards were all frowning as they stayed in a sealed space. Their eyes were focused on a piece of jade on the table. This type of jade was a special stone found in the Tianyuan continent. It was known as the mother-child twin jade. There were 2 pieces in total. Once one of the pieces was broken, the other would also shatter at the same time. The piece in the underground labyrinth was the mother-child jade. There was also a mother-child jade that was placed in a very secret place in the royal palace. Only a few important people knew about it. Once the crisis of the kingdom of Pingyang was resolved, the people outside would take the mother-child jade and crush it to inform the king hiding in the underground labyrinth. Currently, the king and his bodyguards who were hiding in the depths of the labyrinth were all hoping that the mother-child jade would shatter quickly. At this moment, a strange sound suddenly entered the ears of the king and his bodyguards. They immediately looked towards the source of the sound with a strange expression. In front of them, there was a 10-meter thick steel wall. Suddenly, there was a thick purple and green light. Everyone's expression changed. Their eyes were filled with shock and confusion as they looked at the purple and green light. Although they did not know what it was, they had a bad premonition in their hearts. What is that thing? The king found it difficult to remain calm. With a dignified expression, he shouted in a low voice. No one replied to the king. Hiding in a completely sealed space, they had no way of knowing what was going on outside. At this time, the purplish-green light that had broken through the wall suddenly moved slowly. It actually drew a circle with a diameter of 2 meters on the steel wall. Wherever the purplish-green light passed, a crack would appear on the steel wall. "Oh no, the wall's about to break through," one of the bodyguards cried out. A guard involuntarily cried out. His face was filled with unconcealable fear. The wall was 10 meters thick and could stop Heaven Saint Masters, yet it had been broken through so easily by the enemy. Just how powerful was the enemy? The group of bodyguards immediately became nervous. They protected the king as they constantly retreated. They sternly stared at the purple and green light that had broken through the wall. Impossible! How could the wall be broken through so easily? Is the enemy a saint ruler? The king's face was filled with unconcealable shock as he spoke with a trembling voice. Boom! Just as His Majesty's voice fell, a muffled sound suddenly rang out. A huge iron pillar, 2 meters wide and 10 meters long, flew out from the wall and fell to the ground with a loud bang. The strong vibration caused the entire underground maze to tremble a few times. At the location where the pillar flew out, there was already a 2-meter-high passage that led to the outside. At this moment, a light sound of footsteps rang out in the quiet underground labyrinth. A young man wearing a white robe stained with blood slowly walked in from the outside. The young man was not very old, at most in his 20s. He had short hair that was less than an inch long and a resolute face. He was very handsome. His Majesty the King and the dozens of personal guards looked at the young man walking out of the passage in horror, and they kept retreating. Who are you?" the king asked with a trembling voice. Xianxia did not say a word. He coldly stared at the king. The king of the Pingyang kingdom was a senile old man. He wore a purple and gold dragon robe and a purple and gold crown on his head. Having been in a high position for a long time, he imperceptibly gave off the aura of a superior. Although his face was filled with fear, His Majesty was not reduced by much. Xianxia took large strides forward and approached the king. Soon, the group of bodyguards was forced into a corner. "Protect the king!" A bodyguard suppressed the fear in his heart and roared. He then fearlessly rushed towards Xianxia. With one person taking the lead, the others behind did not want to fall behind. They all disregarded their lives and quickly rushed towards Xianxia. Chapter 4:13. Xianxia did not show any mercy. With a flick of his finger, rays of purple and green sword chi shot out from his fingertips and killed all the great Saint Master Guards. Only 3 Earth Saint Master Guards managed to survive this round of attacks. Your Majesty, run. We'll hold him back. The 3 Earth Saint Master Guards were not afraid at all. They immediately threw themselves at Xianxia and used their bodies to block Xianxia, giving the king time to escape. The king of the Pingyang Kingdom looked at the dead guards with a pained expression. He did not choose to run because he knew that he could not escape at all. It would be a waste of energy. Stop! The king of Pingyang Kingdom suddenly spoke to stop the 3 guards who were rushing forward. His voice was so weak that it sounded as if he was lacking in strength. Afterwards, he looked at Xianxia in agony and said, "I've already been forced to such a state by you. It's impossible for me to escape. Can you tell me who you are? Even if I die, at least let me die in peace." Xianxia looked at the king of the Pingyang Kingdom expressionlessly and said, "Who I am is not important. You only need to know that I am from the kingdom of Xianxia." Just as I expected, you really are from the kingdom of Xianxia. The king of the Pingyang Kingdom let out a long sigh. He looked at Xianxia with a complicated expression and said, "It seems that this king's decision to attack the kingdom of Xianxia with the other 3 kingdoms was a mistake. I thought that this matter was in the bag, but I did not expect that there was a powerful expert hidden in the kingdom of Xianxia. He actually broke into the palace of the Pingyang Kingdom alone and forced this king to this point." Sigh. The king of the Pingyang Kingdom became very depressed. At this moment, he seemed to have aged a lot and became listless. This king is now your prisoner. This king is willing to cooperate with you to make any decision that I can accept. You can kill me or torture me as you wish, but this king begs you to forgive these guards beside me. They are all innocent." The king looked at Xianxia with a pleading expression. "Your Majesty, our mission is to protect your Majesty's safety. The 3 of us are not afraid of death." The 3 guards were moved by the king's words. They all knelt down on one knee and spoke in impassioned tones. They had already disregarded life and death. The king shook his head and said, "This war started because all the sins are on this king, so the consequences should be borne by this king. It has nothing to do with you. Besides, all of you have your own families and children to take care of." Upon hearing the words family and children, the expressions of the 3 guards immediately became complicated. Their eyes were faintly glistening with tears. The look in Xianxia's eyes became a little complicated, and the light in his eyes flickered. The king mentioned family and children. Xianxia couldn't help but think of his family in Changyang Prefecture. The king looked at Xianxia with pleading eyes and said, "This is all my fault. This king will immediately order the Pingyang Kingdom to withdraw their troops. I only hope that you can forgive these 3 guards of mine." Xianxia's gaze swept across the 3 guards. The 3 of them were pale. Previously, when they blocked Xianxia's sword chi attack, they had already suffered some injuries. Xianxia hesitated for a moment, but in the end he agreed to the king's suggestion and said, "I can forgive them. However, if the 3 of them dare to do anything that will harm the kingdom of Xianxia in the future, they can't blame me for being cruel." The king let out a sigh of relief. These 30 guards had already followed him for 20 years, and had always been silently protecting him. Although they were master and servant, the relationship between them was very deep. The king also didn't want to see all of his guards die in front of his eyes. This was because he knew how strong Xianxia was. If even a Heaven Saint Master couldn't stop him, how could 3 mere Earth Saint Masters be able to stop him? They would only be throwing their lives away. Xianxia didn't kill the king of Pingyang Kingdom. He grabbed the king's shoulder and left, leaving behind the 3 guards who were lucky enough to survive standing there with a sorrowful expression. "Your Majesty!" The 3 guards' eyes were filled with hot tears as they watched the king's figure disappear into the distance. Although they wanted to rush forward and save the king, they simply didn't have the ability to do so. After capturing the king of Pingyang Kingdom, Xianxia quickly left the underground maze and reappeared in front of the majestic hall. Now, the hall was filled with people wearing helmets and armors. Every single one of them was a high-ranking person. There were even a few old men who were high-ranking generals. Seeing Xianxia walk out of the hall, all the generals in the hall immediately became nervous. Many of them had already taken out their saint weapons, planning to stop Xianxia even if they had to risk their lives. This was because they had already sent out a message, and soon, the experts stationed at the border of the stronghold would return. However, when an old man wearing a purple gold dragon robe walked out of the cave, everyone's expression changed drastically. With their shrewdness, they didn't need to think to know that His Majesty had been captured by the other party. Looking at the high-ranking officials and a large number of elite soldiers in the hall, the captured king looked up to the sky and sighed. He then quickly ordered all the soldiers to retreat. Without Xianxia's order, the king immediately issued an imperial edict to withdraw the army gathered at the northern border of the kingdom of Xianxia. After the imperial edict was issued, the king turned his head to look at Xianxia and said, "Now, what do you want this king to do?" Xianxia's display of strength had completely made the king admit defeat. This was because the king was very clear that if he didn't cooperate, it would cause more people to be implicated. He might even do something like massacring the royal palace. This happened too many times in the Tianyuan continent. "Take me to the national treasury," Xianxia said expressionlessly. Hearing this, everyone's expression changed. Immediately, a weak old man said, "No, the national treasury is the source of our kingdom's financial resources. Once the national treasury is ransacked, pooh." Before the old man could finish his words, Xianxia shot out an azure sword qi and pierced through the old man's head. He fell to the ground and died on the spot. Prime Minister, many officials and generals cried out in grief. Soon after, they looked at Xianxia with eyes full of anger. "Grandfather!" Several young generals were filled with grief. They immediately took out their saint weapons. Their eyes flashed with hatred and anger. They shouted, "I'll kill you!" After saying that, they rushed towards Xianxia. "No, all of you retreat." The king immediately called out, but unfortunately, it was already too late. Xianxia did not hold back at all. He extended his finger and a few strands of azulate sword qi shot out, piercing the throats of the generals who had charged over. Blood dyed the hall. "Retreat, all of you, retreat. Do not act rashly," the king shouted anxiously. These people in the main hall were all high-ranking officials of the kingdom of Pingyang. They were the pillars of the kingdom and they couldn't afford to lose them. Otherwise, the kingdom of Pingyang would only exist in name. Then, as if he was afraid that Xianxia would kill everyone in the hall in anger, he hurriedly said, "This king will now take you to the national treasury. No one can stop us. Those who disobey will be beheaded." Afterwards, the king of the Pingyang kingdom personally led the way to the national treasury. Behind the two of them, a large group of fully armed generals and elite soldiers followed closely behind. Every one of them had a nervous expression on their faces. Soon, Xianxia was led by the king to the national treasury. The king ordered the guards to open the door and then walked in with Xianxia. The national treasury of the Pingyang kingdom was built in the royal palace. It was a very large underground space. It was divided into several areas, storing different kinds of materials. Xianxia led the king of the Pingyang kingdom into the area where the magic nuclei were stored. This was a very spacious room. In the middle of the room, there were dozens of large wooden boxes that were 1 meter in length and width. They were emitting powerful energy waves. In the innermost part of the room, dozens of space belts were hanging on a metal rack. Xianxia's divine sense directly penetrated the wooden boxes to observe the magic nuclei. He found that the magic nuclei in the wooden boxes were all first and second order magic nuclei. There were so many magic nuclei that it was impossible to calculate. Xianxia came to the innermost area where dozens of spatial belts were hanging on the metal rack. He found that each belt was pasted with a note. On the note, the name and quantity of the magic nuclei were recorded. A total of 500 third-order magic nuclei. A total of 621 third-order magic nuclei. A total of 1,000 third-order magic nuclei. A total of 700 fourth-order magic nuclei. A total of 530 fourth-order magic nuclei. The dozens of spatial belts contained 3rd rank, 4th rank, and 5th rank monster cores. Each spatial belt contained at least 500 monster cores. Among them, the third-rank monster cores were the most numerous. Based on a rough estimate, there were at least 60 to 70,000 monster cores. As for the fourth-rank monster cores, there were relatively fewer, about 10,000. Looking at the number of magic nuclei marked on the spatial belts, even with Xianxian's calmness, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. The number of magic nuclei here had reached a frightening level. Xianxian was dumbfounded. However, when he thought of the 700 million population of the Pingyang Kingdom, he felt relieved. This was the treasury of the Pingyang Kingdom. With the population of the Pingyang Kingdom, throwing out this pile of magic nuclei wouldn't cause the slightest ripple. Perhaps, this batch of magic nuclei was the result of the Pingyang Kingdom's savings over a few decades or even hundreds of years. Xianxian put all the spatial belts filled with magic nuclei into his spatial ring. As for the dozens of first-order and second-order magic nuclei placed in the middle, he didn't let go of them either. Fortunately, he had several spatial rings on him. The space was large enough to store these things. Seeing Xianxian take away all the magic nuclei, the king could only cry without tears. He sighed in his heart. After this disaster, even if the Pingyang Kingdom didn't fall, its national strength would decline for a long time. Next, Xianxian went to the treasury where the money was stored. He took away all the spatial belts and obtained a large amount of purple gold coins. Conservatively speaking, there were at least 100 million purple gold coins. This was almost all the wealth of the Pingyang Kingdom. Chapter 414. Now, the king of the Pingyang Kingdom had already prepared himself for Xianxian to loot the treasury. Although the emptiness of the treasury would be a great hindrance to the development of the Pingyang Kingdom, it was still better than having all the officials killed. After all, the officials were the most powerful force in the kingdom. If all of them were killed, then there would be a gap in the management of the Pingyang Kingdom. If the kingdom was not properly managed, then in this world where strength was respected, it would be a very frightening situation. After Xianxian looted the treasury where the purple coins were stored, he took a look around the treasury. There was nothing left that he was interested in. Xianxian brought the king of the Pingyang Kingdom out of the treasury. As soon as they arrived outside, they were surrounded by tens of thousands of exquisite items. The ones standing at the front were all courageous old generals who were not afraid of death. "Sire, you have already gone to the treasury, and the imperial decree to retreat has been issued. Now, shouldn't you release the king?" An old general glared at Xianxian and said in a deep voice. Xianxian sneered and said, "Who said I'm going to let him go? He caused the deaths of millions of my kingdom of Jessan soldiers. If I let him go, those soldiers who died in battle will not be able to rest in peace. Those children who lost their father will never be able to forgive me." Xianxian's words caused the faces of the old generals to change. Immediately, one of the old generals said angrily, "Don't tell me you want to execute His Majesty? Aren't you afraid of angering the public? Aren't you afraid that my Pingyang Kingdom will launch an all-out attack on your kingdom of Jessan?" Xianxian's eyes flashed with a fierce light. An intense killing intent spread out and enveloped the entire palace. He said in a cold voice, "Do you believe that I won't kill everyone in the palace right now?" Hearing this, the old general's body shook violently. He did not dare to say anything more. His eyes were filled with deep fear. If Xianxian really did purge the imperial palace, no one in the imperial palace would be able to stop him. After all, he was a terrifying expert who could easily slay two Heaven Saint Masters working together. After that, Xianxian did not say anything more. He grabbed the king's shoulder and flew into the sky. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the horizon, leaving behind a large group of soldiers who were staring blankly at the king. They could only helplessly watch the king being taken away. The group of old generals were filled with anger as they watched the king disappear into the horizon. Their eyes were empty and they were silent for a long time. After a long while, they let out a long sigh. Their expressions were very pessimistic. Although the Pingyang Kingdom was not a superpower, it was still a relatively large kingdom with a population of more than 700 million. Today, a young expert had arrogantly barged into the palace and kidnapped the king in front of so many civil and military officials. To them, This was a great humiliation that could not be washed away. Xianxia grabbed the king of Pingyang Kingdom and flew quickly in the air. According to his original plan, he originally wanted to massacre the entire palace. However, the king's words in the underground maze deeply touched Xianxia's heartstrings. It made him realize that these ordinary soldiers also had families, parents, and children. Although killing them was just a thought, this thought had caused countless orphans and countless white-haired people to mourn the deaths of their children. Because of this and the words that Uncle Xiao said to Xianxia in the Longevity Village, he changed his mind and gave up on the idea of massacring the royal palace. Unless there was no other choice, Xianxia did not want too many innocent people to die in his hands. Xianxia flew past cities of various sizes. After several hours of rushing, he finally arrived at the northern fortress of the kingdom of Jesson in the evening. He then slowly landed on the walls under the terrified gazes of the soldiers. As soon as Xianxia landed on the walls, a group of injured soldiers quickly surrounded Xianxia. They all looked at Xianxia nervously, afraid that Xianxia was an enemy. An old general guarding the northern fortress received the news and quickly rushed over. He separated the crowd and looked at Xianxia with a serious and nervous expression. Now that all the experts in the northern fortress had left, if a Heaven Saint Master suddenly appeared at this time, the consequences would be unimaginable if he was an enemy. No one in the northern fortress would be able to defeat him. The old general's gaze swept past Xianxia and quickly landed on the king of Pingyang Kingdom. A trace of surprise flashed through his eyes. He then said in a deep voice, "King of Pingyang Kingdom, I did not expect you to come personally. State your purpose." The old general's expression was very ugly. He did not welcome these two uninvited guests. Xianxia knew that the old general had misunderstood. He cupped his hands and said, "General, you have misunderstood. The king of Pingyang Kingdom has been captured by me. He is now only a prisoner." "What? You were the one who captured the king of the Pingyang Kingdom?" The old general stared blankly at Xianxia, unable to believe his eyes. "Yes, he was captured by me. I wonder if the 5 imperial advisors of the Qin Empire have arrived," Xianxia said calmly. Hearing Xianxia mention the Qin Empire's imperial advisors, the old general's expression changed slightly. He looked at Xianxia in a different light. He hurriedly and carefully asked, "Do you know the 5 imperial advisors of the Qin Empire?" "I came with the 5 of them from the Qin Empire. However, we separated halfway. The 5 of them came to assist the kingdom of Jesson while I went to the Pingyang Kingdom," Xianxia said. Hearing this, the general seemed to have thought of something. He immediately became overjoyed and cried out, "Are you the young expert who beheaded the 4 Heaven Saint Masters of the Pingyang Kingdom?" Xianxia nodded and did not deny it. He said, "Yes, that is me." Having received confirmation, the old general was overjoyed. The worry in his heart was completely relieved. Then, the way he looked at Xianxia changed completely. After knowing that such a young Heaven Saint Master was an ally, the nervous soldiers in the surroundings finally let out a sigh of relief. They could not help but smile with joy. They were excited to have another Heaven Saint Master as an ally. This was because at this time, a Heaven Saint Master would play a crucial role. Especially during a war, such a Heaven Saint Master would be the spiritual pillar in the hearts of the soldiers. However, the expression of the king of the Pingyang Kingdom who was standing beside him became ugly. The situation was worse than he imagined. He did not expect the kingdom of Jesson to have a relationship with the Qin Empire, one of the 8 strongest countries in the Tianyuan continent. The Qin Empire actually sent an imperial advisor to help. This was very bad news. In addition to this, the number of Heaven Saint Masters that the Pingyang Kingdom lost was far beyond his expectations. How many Heaven Saint Masters died in the Pingyang Kingdom? Although he was a captive, the king of the Qin Empire could not help but ask. Heaven Saint Masters were too important to a kingdom. Once the loss was too great, the Pingyang Kingdom would not be able to bear it. Hearing this, the old general guarding the northern fort laughed and said, "Your Majesty, let this general calculate for you. 3 days ago, Senior Chang Wuji used a heaven-tier battle skill to kill 2 Heaven Saint Masters of the Pingyang Kingdom. This morning, Senior Chang Wuji brought back 4 heads of Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom. After that, he used a Heaven-tier battle skill to kill one of them. The last one, along with the 4 experts from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom, was captured by the Imperial Advisor of the Qin Empire. In the end, their heads were all hung on the city walls. Hearing this, the king of the Pingyang Kingdom swayed and almost fell to the ground. The Pingyang Kingdom only had a total of 10 Heaven Saint Masters. Just outside the city walls, 8 of them had died. If the 2 Heaven Saint Masters in the palace were included, then it would be exactly 10. In other words, the 10 Heaven Saint Masters of the Pingyang Kingdom were all dead. Such a huge loss almost made the king of the Pingyang Kingdom faint. The old general coldly stared at the king of the Pingyang Kingdom for a while, then he clasped his hands towards Jianchen and said in an extremely polite tone, "Little brother, how would you like to deal with the king of the Pingyang Kingdom?" Jianchen waved his hand and expressionlessly said, "His life and death is all up to you." The old general's face lit up with joy and he said a few words of gratitude. He then immediately ordered a few soldiers to tie up the king of the Pingyang Kingdom and guard him. Afterwards, Jianchen was warmly invited into the tower by the old general and was treated as a guest of honor. At the same time, all the generals stationed in the northern fortress came to see Jianchen. When they learned that Jianchen was the mysterious expert who had killed the 4 Heaven Saint Masters of the Pingyang Kingdom and even captured the king of the Pingyang Kingdom, their gazes towards Jianchen underwent a huge change. They all looked at him with respect and envy. Jianchen sat on a stool and looked at the door with a complicated gaze. His eyes faintly revealed a sense of eagerness and expectation, mixed with some nervousness. The old general was very good at reading people's expressions. Jianchen's expression made him feel very puzzled, but he did not show it on his face. He smiled and said, "Little brother, may I ask if you are the imperial advisor of the Qin Empire?" Jianchen nodded absent-mindedly, and then immediately said, "Old general, may I ask if the people of Changyang Prefecture are here?" The old general was stunned. He shook his head, "I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint the imperial advisor. Due to the urgency of the battles in the eastern, southern, and western fortresses, the people of the Changyang clan and many experts have gone to reinforce them. Even the 2 Heaven Saint Masters guarding our northern fortress have gone with them." A sliver of disappointment appeared on Jianchen's face when he heard that. He continued to ask, "Has the first young master of Changyang Prefecture been sent away as well?" The old general could not help but glance at Jianchen when he heard that. He said, "The first young master of Changyang Prefecture had all 4 of his limbs severed. He was sent back to Changyang Prefecture in Lore City to recuperate at noon today. He is not here." Jianchen's questions made the old general feel very doubtful. The kingdom of Jesson and the Qin Empire had never interacted before. Yet today, several imperial advisors of the Qin Empire had suddenly come to assist the kingdom of Jesson in fending off the invaders. This had already puzzled the upper echelons of the northern fortress. They did not know why the imperial protector of the Qin Empire had sent people to assist the kingdom of Jesson. And now, the young man in front of him was also an imperial advisor of the Qin Huang Empire. Furthermore, he had asked about the Changyang clan as soon as he arrived, as if he was quite concerned about the Changyang clan. This caused the old general to begin guessing in his heart. Could it be that the Qin Huang Empire sending people to help the Jesson kingdom had something to do with this young man? Although he was doubtful, the old general did not dare to ask. He knew what he should ask and what he should not. Once he heard that the people of Changyang Prefecture had left, Jianchen's face was filled with unconcealable disappointment. The old general took in his expression and confirmed his guess. Chapter 415. Although the old general had his doubts, he didn't dare to ask. He knew what he should and shouldn't ask. Upon hearing that the people of Changyang Prefecture had left, Jianchen couldn't hide the disappointment on his face. The old general saw his expression and was even more certain of his guess. "Imperial advisor, although we managed to hold on to the North Fortress, the other 3 fortresses in the east, south, and west have been breached by the enemy. The enemy is now advancing towards the imperial city. The kingdom of Jesson is still in a precarious situation. I hope that Imperial Advisor can lend us a hand and help the kingdom of Jessen overcome this crisis. The old general looked at Jianchen with a pleading expression. Although he hadn't seen Jianchen's strength with his own eyes, he had heard of it from Chang Wuji. Furthermore, Jianchen had infiltrated the imperial palace alone and captured the king of the Pingyang kingdom. This was proof of Jianchen's strength. If he was willing to lend a hand, it would be a great help to the kingdom of Jessen. Jianchen's expression turned serious when he heard the old general's words. He pondered for a moment and asked a few more questions. After inquiring about the latest situation of the 3 fortresses, he left the North Fortress and rushed to the West Fortress overnight. This was because he was the closest to the West Fortress and the situation there was equally dangerous. Although Jianchen wanted to return to the kingdom of Jessen, he had to help the kingdom of Jessen overcome this crisis. Therefore, he could only suppress his homesickness and wait until everything calmed down before he could return. The North Fortress and the West Fortress of the kingdom of Jessen weren't too far apart. After 4 hours of flight, Jianchen arrived at the West Fortress. However, the fortress had already been breached by the Hidden Dragon Kingdom. The flag of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom had been planted on the dilapidated fortress. More than 1 million soldiers were stationed there. Behind them, large amounts of food and resources were being transported to the front lines through the West Fortress of the Kingdom of Jessen. The Hidden Dragon Kingdom's army had already entered the Kingdom of Jessen. This fortress was only a temporary supply depot, so Jianchen didn't encounter any Heaven Saint Masters. Jianchen hovered 1,000 meters in the air. It was completely dark now. The thick darkness of the night completely covered his body. The soldiers below didn't even notice a Heaven Saint Master hovering above them. Jianchen didn't stay for too long. Wrapping his body in wind elemental energy, he used the cover of the clouds in the sky to silently fly towards the kingdom of Jessen. An hour later, Jianchen arrived above a Class 2 city in the kingdom of Jessen. This Class 2 city was currently occupied by the Hidden Dragon Kingdom's army. The flag that originally belonged to the kingdom of Jessen had been replaced with the flag of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom. Jianchen's eyes flickered. His gaze pierced through the darkness and clearly saw the situation below. He then followed the path of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom's army. After flying like this for the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, the sound of cannon fire could be faintly heard from the front. In front of them, the sky was filled with flames as balls of light shot out from the magic crystal cannons and bombarded the ground. Currently, the army of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom was engaged in a fierce battle with the army of the Jessen Kingdom. Jianchen didn't conceal his presence. His figure quickly swept past the Hidden Dragon Kingdom's army and flew towards the city in front of him. Currently, the kingdom of Jessen's army was gathered in a Class 1 city. They were relying on the advantage of the city walls to resist the Hidden Dragon Kingdom's army. Jianchen's figure landed on the walls of a first-class city. Before his feet even touched the ground, dozens of crossbow bolts, each as thick as a person's wrist, shot towards him. The soldiers of the Jessen Kingdom had assumed that Jianchen was an enemy, so they didn't hold back in their attacks. With a thought from Jianchen, the several dozen crossbow bolts seemed to be blocked by an invisible force when they were 3 meters away from him. They were suspended in the air, unable to advance any further. In the end, they all lost their power and fell onto the city walls with a heavy thud. At this moment, 2 Heaven Saint Masters flew over from the city, one red and one yellow. They arrived before Jianchen in a short while. When they saw Jianchen's appearance, their faces immediately lit up with joy. They hurriedly arrived before Jianchen and clasped their hands, "Greetings to Sir Imperial Protector." These 2 were the Imperial Protectors of the Qin Empire who had come with Jianchen. They were called Dongyi Junbai and Chao Kachin respectively. They were a 4th Cycle Heaven Saint Master and a 3rd Cycle Heaven Saint Master respectively. The soldiers all recognized the 2 of them. When they saw the 2 Heaven Saint Masters greet Jianchen, they immediately understood that this expert who had flown over from behind the enemy was on their side and not their enemy. Immediately, an inexplicable excitement appeared on their faces as they curiously studied Jianchen. Seeing the pale-faced Dongyi Junbai and Chao Kachin, Jianchen's face became stern. He asked, "Are the 2 of you injured?" The 2 of them nodded. Dongyi Junbai said, Sir Imperial Protector, 2 of the experts from the kingdom of Xianxia guarding the western fort have already been killed by the people of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom. The remaining one is heavily injured and is currently recuperating. He doesn't even have half of his strength left. On the other hand, the Hidden Dragon Kingdom has 5 Heaven Saint Masters. The 2 of us fought a great battle with the 5 of them not long ago. Although we repelled them, we also suffered some injuries. Xianxia nodded slightly. He then followed the 2 of them to a luxurious inn in the city. The inn was originally privately owned, but because it was very close to the battlefield, it was temporarily occupied by the army and turned into a temporary command post. Dongyi Junbai, Chao Kachin, and the injured Heaven Saint Master from the kingdom of Xianxia were all staying there. The personal arrival of the Imperial Protector of the Qin Empire caused a huge commotion. All the powerful generals came to greet Xianxia. Even the injured Heaven Saint Master stopped healing. He looked at Xianxia with a pale face and constantly expressed his gratitude. Although Xianxia only seemed to be in his 20s, his status was still there. Moreover, the 2 imperial protectors of the Qin Empire treated him with great respect. As a result, none of the generals believed that Xianxia was really a young man in his 20s. After all, it was not like there were no secret methods to rejuvenate one's youth on the Tianyuan continent. All the powerful generals came to greet Xianxia. They all bowed and were extremely polite. They even spoke carefully, as if they were afraid of angering Xianxia if they said something wrong. Even the Heaven Saint Master guarding the western fort treated Xianxia with great respect. His face was filled with gratitude. As they conversed, Xianxia learned that the Heaven Saint Master was a member of the Imperial Palace. He was originally the commander of the steel-armored army. His name was Tianxing, but after he broke through to Heaven Saint Master, his status changed. He became the Imperial Protector of the Kingdom of Xianxia. He held great authority. Xianxia and the generals exchanged some pleasantries before getting to the main topic. They began to discuss how to deal with the current situation. Sir Imperial Protector, the enemy's army is several times stronger than ours. In terms of numbers, the Kingdom of Xianxia will definitely lose. The only way to achieve victory is to kill all the enemy Heaven Saint Masters. That's right. Heaven Saint Masters are the mental support of every soldier in war. Once they fall, the soldiers will be greatly affected. If all the enemy Heaven Saint Masters are killed, the pressure we face will decrease by a lot. After that, we can capture the enemy commander and use him as a threat. The enemy will be defeated without even fighting. Several generals voiced their opinions one after another. Sir Imperial Protector, the enemy currently has 5 Heaven Saint Masters. 2 are in the 2nd cycle, 2 are in the 3rd cycle, and 1 is in the 4th cycle. If we work together and use our Heaven tier battle skills, we might really be able to kill them all, Chao Kachin said. That's right. Chao Kachin and I can barely fight the 5 of them to a draw. If we have the assistance of Sir Imperial Protector, killing them all won't be impossible, Dongyi Junbai agreed. Hearing the conversation between the 2, the generals all became excited. If all 5 of the enemy Heaven Saint Masters were killed, they would be able to turn the situation around. Xianxia nodded slightly after hearing everyone's suggestions. Everyone's thoughts were the same as his. He had originally planned to do this anyway. Xianxia slowly stood up and said, Dongyi Junbai, Chao Kachin, the 2 of you immediately go and treat your wounds. You must recover in the shortest amount of time. Then immediately head to the eastern fort to deal with the enemy. Sir Imperial Protector, do you want to deal with the experts of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom by yourself? Chao Kachin asked in surprise. Sir Imperial Protector, the enemy has 5 people. Although they don't have a Heaven tier battle skill, they are still very difficult to deal with if they work together. Let me and Chao Kachin work together with Sir Imperial Protector to deal with them. Dongyi Junbai stood up and said with a stern face. Xianxia shook his head and said, There's no need. I can deal with the 5 of them by myself. Time is of the essence right now. The situation in the other 2 directions is probably even more dangerous, so the 2 of you should head over as soon as possible. Xianxia's words shocked everyone present. The strength of the imperial protector of the Qin Empire was far too terrifying to deal with 5 Heaven Saint Masters alone. However, the fact that the Qin Empire's imperial protector was willing to personally help the kingdom of Jesson overcome this crisis made them extremely excited. It was as if they had entered a dream. Hearing Jinshan's words, Chao Kaqin and Dongyi Junbai did not say anything else. They both excused themselves and went to treat their wounds. Afterwards, Jinshan also excused himself. After leaving the inn, he directly flew in the direction of the eastern fort. Now that the 5 Heaven Saint Masters of the Blue Wind Kingdom were injured, it was the perfect opportunity to kill them. Chapter 416. Tonight, the night was very dark. The sky was so dark that one couldn't even see one's own fingers. Thick dark clouds blocked the stars that should have appeared in the sky, so that the starlight and moonlight couldn't penetrate the thick dark clouds and sprinkle down. On the other hand, the battle at the front lines was extremely intense. As far as the eye could see, countless torches could be seen flickering everywhere. The Jesson Kingdom and the Hidden Dragon Kingdom's hundreds of thousands of soldiers were locked in an intense battle. Every second, every minute, there would be people dying. The ground had long since been dyed red with blood. Rivers of blood flowed on the city walls, and the corpses had long since been piled up into mountains. Boom, boom, boom. The magic crystal cannons set up on the city walls continuously shot out cannonballs with powerful energy fluctuations, bombarding the densely packed enemy forces. Every cannonball that landed would take the lives of several or even dozens of people. The enemy forces' corpses were badly mutilated, missing arms and legs. Some of the people who were directly hit by the magic crystal cannons even had their entire bodies turned into minced meat. It was a horrible sight to behold. The battle between the Kingdom of Hidden Dragon and the Kingdom of Jesson had been going on for an entire day. Both sides had suffered heavy casualties. At least 200,000 soldiers had lost their lives and were buried here forever. Charge, kill, deafening battle cries came from the front again. The Kingdom of Hidden Dragon once again gathered 100,000 soldiers and rushed towards the city walls. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. The sound of air being pierced was constantly heard. Steel crossbow bolts as thick as an arm were shot out like moths to a flame. These steel crossbow bolts were shot out by the strong tendon ballistae. They had very strong penetrative power and could pierce through several people's bodies. Following a series of screams, a large number of the enemy soldiers who were charging at the front fell down. After such a long battle, the Kingdom of Jesson had almost used up all the magic crystal cannons and steel crossbow bolts. Some of the bolts that were shot out were from the city hall, while some were made by the craftsmen. There were only a few thousand bolts, and they were quickly used up by the hundreds of ballistae. Suddenly, a loud sound came. The city walls of the Kingdom of Jesson were severely damaged. After being hit by a few magic crystal cannons shot by the Kingdom of Hidden Dragon, a 30-meter-long section of the city wall collapsed. A large number of soldiers were buried, and a fault appeared on the city wall. Boom! Another loud sound came. A magic crystal cannon fired a cannon shell that bombarded the thick city gate. The heavily deformed gate was immediately blown away, and a large number of soldiers behind it were injured. Deafening battle cries rang out from the front. The army of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom was like a flood as they charged toward the broken city gate. A group of soldiers from the Kingdom of Jesson immediately gathered at the city gate. They used their bodies to block the entrance, refusing to let the soldiers of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom enter the city. Very soon, the two sides began to engage in battle. The soldiers at the front were immediately hacked to death. It was a horrible sight. At this moment, a faint green light flew out from behind. It moved very quickly, arriving above the city wall in the blink of an eye. It hovered in the air as a huge presence spread out, enveloping a radius of over 10 kilometers. Before this presence, the space seemed to freeze. The air seemed to have been sucked away. The hundreds of thousands of soldiers felt like a huge rock was pressing down on their chests. Not only was it extremely uncomfortable, but it was also extremely difficult for them to breathe. The full force of a Heaven Saint Master's presence was something that even Earth Saint Masters would find difficult to endure, let alone these weak soldiers. Under the pressure of this presence, the two sides that were fiercely fighting could not help but stop. They could no longer pay attention to the enemy in front of them. Every single one of them had a red face as they revealed an extremely uncomfortable expression. Xianxia hovered in the air and let out a long howl. The sound shook the heavens and echoed through the entire sky. Even the thick layer of dark clouds in the sky was shaken away by the sound wave. The stars that filled the sky could be faintly seen. As for the soldiers below, they suffered even greater damage. Every one of them had lost their sense of hearing, and even their heads were buzzing. After the howl, Xianxia loudly yelled, "Heaven Saint Master of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom, come out and die." As soon as he finished speaking, Xianxia's body was wrapped in a layer of wind elemental energy. He turned into a dazzling green streak of light that streaked across the night sky like a meteor. He flew towards the camp of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom. As if in response to Xianxia's challenge, 5 similarly powerful presences surged out from the camp of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom. They blotted out the sky and covered the earth as they rushed towards Xianxia. Soon after, 5 figures wrapped in elemental energy slowly rose into the sky. Behind the kingdom of Jessin, Dongyi Junbai and Chao Kachin, who had originally gone to treat their wounds, could not help but walk out. They landed on the city walls and looked ahead. Their eyes were like lightning, as if they could see through the night and clearly see the scene in the distance. Even the heavily injured Tianxing couldn't hold back his curiosity and came up to the city walls to watch the battle. They all wanted to see just how powerful the imperial protector of the Qin Empire was. They wanted to see just how powerful the imperial protector of the Qin Empire was. They wanted to see if he could really kill 5 Heaven Saint Masters by himself. Apart from them, countless generals of the kingdom of Jessin had also climbed up the city walls. They were all focused on the few specks of light in the night sky. Xianxia's body was like an arrow that had been released from a bow. He shot towards the 5 Heaven Saint Masters that had already risen into the sky. His aura was like a rainbow as his killing intent soared. "Umph, you dare to say such big words by yourself? You really don't know your place." A loud voice rang out from the other side. It was a Heaven Saint Master from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom. His voice was filled with disdain. Xianxia remained silent. His eyes flashed like lightning as his killing intent flickered. He shot towards the 5 Heaven Saint Masters with a powerful aura. A layer of azure and violet sword chi shot out from his right hand. He wanted to end the battle quickly, so he used the origin energy of the azure and violet sword spirits right from the start. Only then would he be able to kill these Heaven Saint Masters quickly. "Since you want to die, we'll fulfill your wish." Another Heaven Saint Master's voice rang out from the other side. Immediately, 2 of them took out their saint weapons and charged towards Xianxia. Below, countless soldiers had already forgotten about the enemies in front of them. They all looked up at the sky and focused on the battle in the distance. A battle between Heaven Saint Masters could be said to be extremely exciting. To these ordinary soldiers, it was an irresistible attraction. This was because this was not only a battle of the peak, but also a clash of the strongest forces on both sides. Their victory or defeat would directly affect the final outcome of the battle. The 3 of them gathered together very quickly. The 2 Heaven Saint Masters from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom swung their saint weapons at Xianxia. They did not hold back at all. Xianxia stabbed out with the origin energy of the azure and violet sword spirits with lightning speed. The 2 saint weapons swelled and collided with each other. A surge of energy erupted as the 2 weapons collided, instantly engulfing the 2 Heaven Saint Masters. The experts from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom did not know how powerful the origin energy of the azure and violet sword spirits were. The 2 Heaven Saint Masters from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom had suffered a great loss from the first clash. A 2-finger-sized hole had appeared in the saint weapons in their hands. Because of the saint weapons, the 2 Heaven Saint Masters were also greatly affected. They both spat out a mouthful of blood as shock filled their faces. Taking advantage of their stupefaction, Xianxia struck out again. The origin energy of the azure and violet sword spirits tore through the pitch-black night sky. Before one of the Heaven Saint Masters could even recover from the shock of losing his saint weapon, Xianxia had already beheaded him. Xianxia then struck out with his left hand, striking the Heaven Saint Master's forehead and dispersing his soul on the spot. At this moment, the other Heaven Saint Master finally returned to his senses. Seeing the death of his companion, his face was filled with shock. He no longer dared to fight against Xianxia alone. He immediately flew back and yelled, "Let's go together. Be careful of his saint weapon. Don't take it head-on." Hearing their companions cry for help, the expressions of the three Heaven Saint Masters who had originally planned on watching the battle from afar changed. However, they did not hesitate at all. The three of them struck out together, fighting against Xianxia with the four of them. Xianxia charged into the midst of the four Heaven Saint Masters, constantly striking out with the origin energy of the azure and violet sword spirits. The dazzling azure and violet sword spirits illuminated the pitch-black night sky as he engaged in a great battle with the four Heaven Saint Masters. However, the four of them now knew that they could not take the azure and violet sword chi head-on, so they did not dare to take Xianxia's attacks head-on. They all dodged, making it so that for a short period of time, Xianxia could not do anything to them. High Earth Tier Battle Skill, Whirlwind Annihilation. A shout suddenly rang out as one of the Heaven Saint Masters used an Earth Tier battle skill to attack Xianxia. Wild winds began to blow as a tornado suddenly formed, surrounding Xianxia. Within the tornado, blades of wind began to form, revolving around Xianxia's body and cutting at him. Seeing that Xianxia had been restrained, the other three Heaven Saint Masters did not want to fall behind. They all used Earth Tier battle skills. High Earth Tier battle skill, Heavy Sword of the Earth. Third form of water manipulation technique, condensing water into ice. Fifth form of heavy sword technique, Void Piercing Sword. With four angry shouts, the four Heaven Saint Masters used their Earth Tier battle skills at the same time. A pressure that seemed to come from the heavens pressed down on Xianxia, locking him in place. Xianxia coldly snorted as a light flashed in his eyes. His mind controlled everything in the world. As soon as the tornado formed around him, it was forcefully controlled by Xianxia's powerful mind, stopping it in midair. Shortly after, the azure and violet sword spirit's origin energy rapidly surged, forcefully blocking the Earth Tier battle skills of the three Heaven Saint Masters. Boom! Following an earth-shattering explosion, the surging energy shockwaves wreaked havoc between the heavens and the earth, and then crazily rolled in all directions, mercilessly destroying everything in its path. Countless soldiers below were affected by the shockwaves and suffered heavy casualties. The Hidden Dragon Kingdom's military camp suddenly became a mess. "Quick, protect the city walls." Dongi Junbai's expression changed as he stood on the city walls. He immediately yelled out before joining hands with Chao Kachin to set up a defensive barrier to protect the damaged city walls. Right now, the city walls of this first-class city were completely unable to withstand the impact of such powerful waves of energy. Furthermore, the city walls were filled with people. Once they collapsed, the casualties would definitely be extremely heavy. Chapter 417. Just as Dongi Junbai and Chao Kachin were about to cast down a layer of energy to protect the wall, the violent shockwaves of energy surged toward them. The four Heaven Saint Masters had simultaneously used an Earth Tier battle skill, so the shockwaves of energy were extremely powerful. Coupled with the fact that they were not very far away, the barrier that Dongi Junbai and Chao Kachin had cast down shook violently, making it extremely difficult for them to maintain it. Although the two of them were Heaven Saint Masters, the area of the wall they were protecting was just too large. If Xianxia and the others were a little closer to the wall, they would not be able to withstand it. Even if the two of them worked together, they would not be able to protect the wall. As the five of them fought in the air, Xianxia and the four Heaven Saint Masters from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom were unable to withstand the powerful shockwaves of energy. Their bodies were constantly pushed back in the air. Although the shockwaves of energy did not pose much of a threat to them, they were still unable to stabilize their bodies due to the lack of support in the air. As the four Heaven Saint Masters flew back, they constantly coughed up blood. Their faces were pale and they were already heavily injured. This was because the origin energy of the sword spirits had left a two-finger-sized hole in their saint weapons. Just what kind of power is that? It's actually so terrifying. Be careful, no matter what, don't clash with that mysterious power in his hands. The Heaven Saint Masters cried out in fear. Their gazes towards Xianxia were filled with deep dread. Xianxia's eyes flashed. At that moment, his eyes had completely turned into a purplish green. His left eye flashed with a purple light while his right eye flashed with a green light. It looked extremely demonic, as if it was not the eyes of a normal person. Suddenly, the countless steel crossbow bolts and rocks of various sizes on the ground seemed to be controlled by a mysterious power. They all rose into the air and began to glow with a faint purplish-green light. They shot towards the Heaven Saint Masters from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom like moths to a flame. They moved as fast as lightning. The 4 experts from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom were still immersed in the shock of the destruction of their saint weapons. They did not expect such a strange attack from the ground to attack them. Caught off guard, several holes appeared in their bodies. Several streams of blood gushed out from their bodies, dyeing the sky red. The intense pain caused the 4 of them to emit a muffled groan from their throats at the same time. Immediately, their faces were filled with shock as they looked at the thing that was rapidly shooting towards them. Their expressions immediately became incomparably solemn. Damn it, what's going on? One of the experts could not help but curse. However, they did not hesitate at all, immediately flying high into the air. At the same time, Saint Force surged out of their bodies, forming a barrier around them to block the attacks from below. When the fine steel crossbow bolts and countless rocks struck the energy barrier around them, the barrier began to violently tremble before slowly breaking apart. The barrier could only slow them down slightly. Earth Elemental Armor. An expert with Earth-attributed Saint Force immediately roared out. The Earth Elemental energy in the surroundings rapidly gathered, forming an armor completely condensed from Earth Elemental energy around him. Its defense was extremely powerful, barely blocking the attack of the sword chi. Xianxia opened his left hand and 3 crossbow bolts as thick as an arm immediately hovered in front of him. They shot towards the expert in the Earth Elemental armor with faint sword chi. Their speed was even faster, causing ear-piercing sounds as they tore through the air. The expert's ears twitched and he immediately discovered that the 3 crossbow bolts were not ordinary. He immediately swung the saint weapon in his hand to block them. Ding, ding, ding. With 3 clear sounds, the 3 crossbow bolts were sent flying by the expert. However, the powerful force from the crossbow bolts caused his body to sway slightly, causing him to uncontrollably retreat a certain distance. At this moment, the origin energy from the sword spirits in Xianxia's right hand rapidly shot over. With a flash of azure and violet light, it stabbed towards the expert's forehead, arriving before him in the blink of an eye. At such a close distance, the expert had no time to dodge at all. With no other choice, he could only brace himself and use his saint weapon to block the attack. When the two collided, a 2-finger-wide gap appeared on the expert's saint weapon once again. He spat out another mouthful of blood. The continuous damage to his saint weapon had caused his injuries to become even more severe, causing his battle prowess to plummet. Xianxia followed up with another attack. The origin energy of the sword spirits stabbed out once again, piercing his forehead and wiping out his soul on the spot. Xianxia's left hand shot out like lightning and took the spatial ring from the expert's hand. Afterwards, he immediately charged towards the other 3 Heaven Saint Masters. The origin energy from the sword spirits continuously stabbed out. Right now, he was using the origin energy as if it was the light wind sword from before. Pooh! Another Heaven Saint Master's neck was cut off and his head flew high into the air. A layer of elemental energy quickly condensed and wrapped around the head as it flew off into the distance. Heavy Sword Technique, 5th Form, Void Piercing Sword. Water Manipulation Technique, 3rd Form, Condensing Water into Ice. The remaining 2 Heaven Saint Masters once again used their Heaven-tier battle skills to attack Xianxia in order to buy time for the beheaded Heaven Saint Master to escape. A sliver of disdain appeared on Xianxia's face. The origin energy of the azulate sword spirits quickly stabbed out, blocking their attacks. At the same time, a crossbow bolt shot out from the ground with a faint azulate sword chi. It caught up to the fleeing head in the blink of an eye and directly pierced through it, destroying the soul and wiping out the Heaven Saint Master's soul. Boom! A violent explosion of energy erupted as the Earth-tier battle skills of the two Heaven Saint Masters collided with the origin energy of the sword spirits. Immediately, a powerful shockwave of energy erupted and swallowed the three Heaven Saint Masters. A gleam of light flashed through Xianxian's eyes. With a thought, several crossbow bolts shot up from below, shooting toward the two Heaven Saint Masters. At the same time, Xianxian began to glow with an azure light as dense wind elemental energy gathered around him. He then forcefully resisted the shock waves of energy as he rapidly approached the two Heaven Saint Masters. Taking advantage of the fact that they were blocking the incoming crossbow bolts, Xianxian cut off their heads with a swing of his sword, wiping out their souls. The five Heaven Saint Masters of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom had all died in battle. In the camp of the Kingdom of Jessen, Dongyi Junbai, Chao Kaqin, and Tianxing were all filled with shock. They stared at Xianxian floating in the night sky in shock and were speechless for a long time. After a while, Tianxing finally let out a long sigh and murmured, "The Imperial Protector of the Qin Empire really is powerful. I never thought that he would be able to kill all five Heaven Saint Masters of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom in such a short amount of time. With such battle prowess, I'm afraid that even a sixth cycle Heaven Saint Master would be far inferior." Hearing this, Dongyi Junbai and Chao Kaqin both sucked in a deep breath. The shock in their hearts had already reached a point of no return. They were extremely clear about Xianxian's background. He was not as old as they had imagined. Instead, he was a true youth, definitely not over 30 years old. "I never thought that the Imperial Protector's strength would be so much greater than we expected. His talent is just too frightening." Chao Kaqin's voice trembled as he spoke. Dongyi Junbai also let out a sigh. Using a voice that only the two of them could hear, he said, "The Imperial Protector being able to become a Heaven Saint Master at such a young age is already shocking enough, but I never thought that his strength would be so great that he would be able to kill 5 Heaven Saint Masters in a row. Perhaps, before long, Sir Imperial Protector will become a true Saint Ruler. I really wonder how he cultivates." Dongyi Junbai's eyes were filled with envy when he mentioned the two words Saint Ruler. Xianxian hovered in the pitch-black night sky. With a wave of his hand, several space rings slowly flew up from below and landed in his hand. After taking the space rings, Xianxian expanded his soul to cover a radius of 15 kilometers. Finally, he found the commander of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom in a dense group of people. Chapter 418. Xianxian's body was enveloped by the azure wind element as he shot through the night sky like a streak of azure light, quickly flying toward the enemy commander. The expressions of the vice-generals beside the commander changed drastically when they saw Xianxian fly over. They cried out in a hurry, "Oh no, he's coming for the general. Protect the general. General, run." A few of the deputy generals exclaimed in shock. Then, they surrounded the old man, who seemed to be in his 60s, and quickly escorted him to the back. The surrounding soldiers all returned to their senses as well. Even though the death of their Heaven Saint Masters was a huge blow to their morale, there was no lack of hot-blooded men among them. They all used their bodies to block the old general's path. Seeing the actions of these people, Xianxian's eyes revealed a sliver of disdain. The commanders were only Earth Saint Masters, so how could they protect the Hidden Dragon Kingdom's commander from a Heaven Saint Master? In the blink of an eye, Xianxian closed in on them. With a flick of his finger, streaks of azure and violet sword chi shot out from his fingertips, causing the Earth Saint Master deputies to become flustered and unable to fend for themselves. Xianxian took advantage of this opportunity to grab the old general by the shoulder and lift him up. He then quickly flew over the heads of the soldiers and headed towards the Jessen Kingdom's camp. Although there were many Earth Saint Masters in the army, they could not fight back against a Heaven Saint Master. They could only watch as their commander was taken away by Xianxian. They were all furious. When Xianxia landed on top of the dilapidated walls with the Hidden Dragon Kingdom's commander in tow, the soldiers of the Jessan Kingdom immediately let out heaven-shaking cheers. Each and every one of them had expressions of excitement on their faces. Many of them even had tears of joy flowing from their eyes. Due to the large difference in numbers and the disproportionate number of peak experts, the Kingdom of Jessan had been suppressed by the Hidden Dragon Kingdom's army for the past few days. They could only use their geographical advantage to fight back. They had originally thought that the Kingdom of Jessan would definitely lose this time, causing many of the soldiers to fall into despair. But who would have thought that in such a short amount of time, the situation would change so drastically? The 5 Heaven Saint Masters of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom had all been killed by their own experts, and even the enemy commander had been captured alive. How could the soldiers not be overjoyed? On the other hand, the soldiers of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom were all demoralized. They no longer had the will to fight. The Heaven Saint Masters were like a pillar of support to the ordinary soldiers. Now that their pillar of support had fallen, they no longer had the courage and fearlessness they had before. Even the generals were stupefied. Their eyes were empty. The death of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom's 5 Heaven Saint Masters had already dealt a heavy blow to them. Now that their commander had been captured, they had no idea what to do next. Many of the generals gathered around the ruined walls. They all looked at Xianxia in admiration as they thanked him. Although Xianxia only seemed to be in his 20s, they were not naive enough to believe that Xianxia was only as young as he seemed. They all believed that Xianxia was a senior who had lived for hundreds of years. Although the old general of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom had been captured by Xianxia, his presence did not decrease at all. He glared at Xianxia and growled, "Imperial Protector? Just which kingdom's Imperial Protector are you? You actually dared to interfere with the matters of our 4 kingdoms. Are you not afraid that we'll flatten your kingdom?" The death of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom's 5 Heaven Saint Masters had a huge impact on the overall strength of the kingdom. As a result, the old general's hatred for Xianxia was extremely strong. When the generals of the Kingdom of Jessan heard this, their gazes were filled with ridicule. Their faces were filled with disdain. In front of the Qin Empire, one of the 8 great kingdoms, the 4 kingdoms were as weak as tofu, unable to withstand a single blow. Old General Su, you better show some respect in front of the esteemed Imperial Protector. Otherwise, the consequences of offending the Qin Empire are not something you can bear. A general coldly snorted. Hearing this, the Hidden Dragon Kingdom's old General Su's expression changed as he exclaimed, "Qin Huang Kingdom? Could it be the Qin Empire, one of the 8 great kingdoms of the Tianyuan continent?" "That's right," the general who had spoken earlier said proudly. His face was filled with pride. The fact that the Kingdom of Jessan was able to associate themselves with the Qin Empire was definitely a joyous occasion for them. Old General Su sneered. He did not believe it at all. "Don't try to scare me. Don't think that I don't know the background of the Kingdom of Jessan. How could the Kingdom of Jessan associate themselves with a powerful country like the Qin Empire? You're so naive to think that you can scare me with just 2 Heaven Saint Masters. Do you think that I, Su Yunfei, am a 3-year-old child?" The generals of the Kingdom of Jessan were enraged. However, before they could do anything, Xianxia raised his hand to stop them. He said, "The enemy's Heaven Saint Masters are all dead. I'm sure you all know what to do next." The generals of the Kingdom of Jessan did not dare to delay. They all nodded respectfully. Xianxia handed old General Su over to them. He then turned to Dongyi Junbai and Chao Kachin and said, "Go and treat your wounds. Once you're healed, head to the southern fort immediately." "Sir." Dongyi Junbai and Chao Kachin replied respectfully. Their attitude towards Xianxia had changed drastically. Their respect came from the bottom of their hearts. It was completely different from before. What happened next had nothing to do with Xianxia. He had done what he needed to do. The rest was up to the generals. Xianxia returned to the inn that had been temporarily converted into a command post to rest. He closed the door tightly and forbade anyone from disturbing him. He blocked all the generals and leaders of the various factions who wanted to use this opportunity to make friends with him. That night, loud voices constantly rang out from the walls. The generals stationed at the western fort of the kingdom of Xianxia stood on the walls and gave a speech. They used their words to suppress the soldiers of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom and ordered them to surrender. On the other hand, the highest commander of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom was tied up like a dumpling and pressed against the walls by several experts. The death of 5 Heaven Saint Masters and the capture of their commander had caused the soldiers of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom to lose all morale. Their battle prowess had greatly decreased as well. In the end, after a discussion among the commanders, they decided to retreat. This was because they knew that they no longer had any Heaven Saint Masters on the front lines. Once the Heaven Saint Masters of the Kingdom of Xianxia moved against the ordinary soldiers, they would not be able to stop them. Even the soldiers themselves would be killed. Xianxia's arrival had temporarily alleviated the dangerous situation in the western fort of the Kingdom of Xianxia. Many of the generals were grateful and wanted to hold a feast for Xianxia, but they were firmly rejected by Xianxia. With the crisis temporarily resolved, the soldiers of the Kingdom of Xianxia began to recuperate. A large number of craftsmen were sent out from the city to repair the damaged walls to prevent another attack from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom. The next afternoon, Chao Kachin and Dongi Junbai finally recovered from their wounds with the help of several dozen Radiant Saint Masters. They immediately followed Xianxia's orders and left for the belt in the south. What happened next was extremely peaceful. Xianxia stayed there for 2 days, only leaving after Tianxing had completely recovered. Afterwards, he hurried towards the eastern fort as quickly as possible. The Hidden Dragon Kingdom only had 9 Heaven Saint Masters in total. 4 of them had died in the northern fort and 5 had been slain by Xianxia. It could be said that the Hidden Dragon Kingdom's experts were all dead. As a result, Xianxia did not have to worry about the Hidden Dragon Kingdom sending more experts over. With Tianxing, a Heaven Saint Master, guarding the fort was enough to deter an army of 1,000,000. The eastern fort was very far from the western fort, almost crossing the entire Kingdom of Xianxia's territory. It was over 10,000 kilometers away. Even with Xianxia's speed, it would take him 6 to 8 hours to get there. The eastern fort of the Kingdom of Xianxia had already been breached by the Blue Wind Kingdom. The army of the Blue Wind Kingdom pursued the deserters of the Kingdom of Xianxia deep into the Kingdom of Xianxia's territory. Xianxia flew for over 4 hours and only stopped when he was over 3,000 kilometers away from the eastern fort. This was because in a large city not far from him, a dozen or so Heaven Saint Masters radiating with elemental energy were engaged in a great battle. Ripples of energy shook the sky, causing it to darken. It was extremely intense. Xianxia looked over, as if he could see through space. He could clearly see what was happening a dozen kilometers away. His face then became extremely stern. There were a total of 15 people fighting, 11 against 4. Of the 4, 2 were people Xianxia knew. They were the principal of Kargath Academy, Kafir, and the imperial advisor of the Qin Empire, Shao Tian. Although he did not know the other 2, it was obvious that they were from the Kingdom of Xianxia. The difference in numbers was just too great. The 3 Heaven Saint Masters from the Kingdom of Xianxia were heavily injured and covered in blood. Shao Tian, on the other hand, was the most heavily injured out of the 4. His body was covered in countless terrifying wounds. There was even a hole in his chest that was bleeding profusely. He was completely covered in blood. Seeing this, Xianxia's eyes turned cold. His killing intent surged as a tremendous presence spread out in all directions. He then charged toward the battlefield. At the same time, countless rocks and sand floated into the air below the battlefield. They shot toward the 11 Heaven Saint Masters with the speed of lightning, relieving the pressure on the Heaven Saint Masters from the Kingdom of Xianxia. Imperial Protector. Shao Tian immediately recognized Xianxia and smiled. Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, Martial World, and tales of demons and gods.